First of all, good evening. My presentation is going to be in a very different scale and content with what Noumena presented earlier. I will be not so much focused on technology, as that it's part of their expertise, and I'm going to focus more or less on methodology, on why we use participatory planning, which are the tools, which are the methods. Participatory planning, as you may understand, is a process that requires contact with people, requires physical contact in many cases. There are many also digital tools, but the priority is reacting with people and participating in a real community. So this approach emphasizes the inclusion of diverse stakeholders, community members, local organizations, and other relevant parties in planning and decision-making process. So, in a sense, it's a policy process, and it can be used in several cases. We can use it in evaluation stage of a project, a policy, or whatever we want to test. We can use it in implementation, and of course, we can use it in planning. And all this are linked together in what we call overall participatory methodology. So, why use participatory methods? What is the positive aspect of it, apart from the personal views of the planner or the designer? It has many functions. It enables a high quality of democratic governance, as we call it, which is a very important element. It leads to the strengthening of the capacities of the civil society and the local communities. Many studies have led to the result that it helps also to the development and the delivery of programs effectively and efficiently. As you can imagine, when you reach a consensus to a project, it's very easy to implement it, so this is very important. It helps build public confidence and trust in decisions, and also this has to do with effectiveness and efficiency of the projects. It generates a great understanding of public issues, concerns, and priorities and solutions. It builds on a broader support of programs and initiatives in many cases. It focuses a lot on mutual learning, and this is also, although it's a processual issue, it's very important in how you design final outcomes. It ensures that decisions and policies incorporate knowledge and expertise that will be usually overlooked in many other cases. So input from local communities, input from minority groups, this is something that it is integrated into the process. It's a process that is usually overlooked in many cases. So many stakeholders are not part of the design process due to many circumstances. But so through these participatory methods, you ensure inclusion in a higher level. And of course, diversity in the decision-making process, focusing on a variety of groups. And as I said, all this has a final, let's say, focus to achieve consensus and a collaborative approach in the design process or in the project implementation. So we then reach out to the second question. If we agree to use participatory methods, which methods should we use? Which methods are, let's say, relevant with our project and our goals? I think that in all the cases, in terms of when we deal with methodology, participatory approaches has many similarities. So the first thing that you need to ask is which are our objectives, so which are the reasons that we want to involve local stakeholders, and what are the outcomes that we expect. What's very important also is the topic, the nature of the scope and the issue. So we have a different methods if it's a planning project, a different methods if it's a building project, a different methods if it's just stakeholder project for process for policy recommendation or policy guidance. So based on the topic, we choose different approaches. For the method, it's also important which are the participants, who is affected, who is interested in the project. As you can imagine, we will use different methods with students or educated participants or highly educated participants. We will use different methods if we focus on minority groups or with groups that don't have access, for example, to technological equipment and so on. Time is also important. Many will say that time is one of the most crucial elements in every stakeholder process. All the projects, usually the majority of projects, use a very limited amount of stakeholder engagement. That increasing this, it's also increases time increases cost. So time constraints are very important in all the process of participation. And of course, budget, which is linked with all the other issues. That is also a very crucial element of how we're going to choose and which method. In this axis that you see in the diagram, you can see how all several elements are linked. So mapping out diversity, reaching consensus, advising and democratization, all these elements are, let's say it's an output axis, a targeted output axis, and we can see how all the elements of the participatory methodology are linked together based on the goals that you have each time. What I described you is based, of course, in practice and in the literature of most of the main people that have been dealing with these issues. We can see that participation has different steps, it has different processes, and it helps in a variety of ways. Arnstein developed a 7-step approach, an 8-step approach in 1969, which the first approach called the ladder of citizen participation, and presented different levels of participation and how we can go from manipulation to citizen control in every policy aspect, in every project aspect. Glass also in 1979 presented a similar methodology that it's the core methodology that we follow today in more recent research and approach. So in a way, participation is here in order to inform people, to consult, to involve, to collaborate, and in the end to empower and to help reach a final decision. This is the steps for what we usually follow. It can be used in a variety of ways, from presentation to public awareness projects, to field observations, to collecting opinions, to mapping ideas, to dissemination of information, to creating solutions. So there are a variety of steps that you can use participatory methods that aim in different targets. So in a way, methodology and tools, sorry about that, applies to this variety of steps. In a way, why I want to use this methodology and how you're going to relate to different steps of the participatory process. Also important elements are the following: the societal context, the good timing with public controversy, the institutional context, the link to the political sphere, and of course other issues like political goals that affect the whole process. So in a sense that when you have, let's say, countries like Greece, for example, that we don't have a very collaborative culture in governance, participation is more difficult. You need this to take it into consideration for your methods and how you apply it. In countries like other countries, Southern Europe, like Spain, for example, where we have more integrated approaches in governance related to participation, you usually choose different contexts and you can do more advanced techniques. So the themes and objectives are the first step for the participation context. We're not going to dwell into specifics, but based on what you want to achieve, you follow different methods, and that's what we're going to present you very briefly. So let's say that you want to start with presentation and dissemination information, something that's very common even in the work that you are doing today in the InPlanEd project. So using social media, it's actually a very initial participatory method. The tools are very well known, from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other programs and software. It's very useful for generating interest and feedback from the public over some time. It's accessible. It gives a forum for exchange of the ideas. It's like very low cost. But of course, you need access to digital services, and it's not very useful when you deal with vulnerable communities or with people over a certain age that they're not very keen on using digital tools and digital services. Where you want to achieve public awareness, public meetings are the most, let's say, basic way to do that. Although it seems very obvious, it's not very obvious in many cases. Arranging a public meeting, it's a very time-consuming process, a very demanding process. You need to be very aware of local stakeholders, how to reach them. You need to be able to do presentations, to gather community members, to gather smaller, larger groups or panels or whatever tool you may use. There are many cases, as we can see in the slide. So the basic one is to present your ideas, doing Q&A. You can do what is called a town hall meeting, which is a meeting in a place where it has some importance with the community, panels or round tables with larger or smaller groups. So it has many strengths, I think, but of course it has some weaknesses, as we will see. When you convene in a public meeting, there are many difficulties with controlling the environment and controlling the process. Some people may be discouraged to talk. The audience needs to be representative, otherwise you will not have a very inclusive approach to participation. And attendance levels are very important in order to ensure some kind of a higher reach. So this is something that we usually use as a method, as a tool. When you want to collect opinions from larger body of general public, when you want to reach greater groups, of course, as you can imagine, you can also use the previous steps. I mean, this is not a one-off approach. You can use social media, you can use public meetings, but in this case, it's also interviews help a lot, and focus groups. So when you want to do a targeting approach that affects a huge parts of the community in a variety of elements, in order to give space to each group, you separate it, you give them time, you interview different stakeholders and community leaders or leaders in a specific field. So this generates an in-depth information on specific topics, and of course it's time consuming, it's a lot of time, and should continue until you reach the point that you want. And this is something that we usually use in large-scale consultations about planning projects where you meet groups from different sectors. You gain their ideas and their views. You do interviews. So this is a very common process to use. In the same way, you can do surveys and, of course, citizen science and crowdsourcing ideas, which are more contemporary approaches. So when you want to reach out to greater audience, surveys is a very common practice and it's very participatory. I mean, in a sense, when you want to get ideas from 1,000 population, 2,000 population, so doing surveys is a very good practice that you can follow, and people are informed. And usually you also have a very good structural approach to participation. Then in the last years, we use a lot of citizen science and crowdsourcing ideas and tools through media platforms. So this is an idea that you facilitate the collection of data and resources in an organized way through collaboration with citizens that you consider them to be some kind of professional scientists. So this is done usually digitally, but you can also use other tools. The whole idea is that you treat people, you treat your audience as data resources, and this is part of your end product and your end results. And it's very important that this is very used in a very high extent in what we call PPGIS projects, or participatory approaches with GIS solutions, very common practice the last years, particularly in urban planning projects and in larger scale projects, but you can use it also in smaller projects, in a sense that you define the target group that you want to approach, and you treat it as a data resource that has, and you give them access to a platform or through interviews or other kind of methodologies that we already presented in order to gain ideas and gain resources. These are some examples that we have also presented in the previous week. Mapping ideas is also something that's very common in participatory processes. It's a very common, let's say, result of this process that you want to get feedback based on a plan, based on a map. Again, very common practices that like community mapping or mind mapping that's based on the approach of David Lynch, where you create roundtables, you use PPGIS, as I mentioned earlier, technologies or visual mapping tools. This enables citizens to map social, ecological, and other assets. It's a very useful way for starting the process of communication with the community, as people are very keen on mapping and sketching, and it can be used to document certain aspects, strengths and weaknesses. Of course, again, it's time consuming and it's expensive process in a way that you need a lot of resources to walk through it, even if from physical space or even digital space. You can see commonspace has developed this kind of tools in previous projects, like the PPCT project, that we used PPGIS technologies to map intervention areas in the city of Athens. But of course, there are many platforms that do similar things and projects that follow same approaches. So when you want to follow, and when your target is in order to move to a next theme and topic, you want to bring deliberation, as we say, you want to include public participation in the policy decisions. We usually use what we call citizen juries method, where you have Again, the tools are the same, roundtables, virtual meeting tools, but the process is different. You treat people as a jury of a policy, so this brings new light, new ideas to policy creations. It can bring new thinking, it can develop a deep understanding of an issue. But of course, which group you choose is something that it's important for the final outcome. Participants may not show up, group selection may be mistrusted, and so on. Of course, visioning is part of the participation process and the creating ideas. Again, you can use different tools and methods to bring this process from idea sharing, recording, or using other digital tools. But of course, it's a very important step in the participation process. Creating solutions is also an important element of participation. Workshops, open space events is the most common methods that we use. There are many tools. There are many also digital tools that have been developed the last years, like Mentimeter, Slido, GoGrade, that helps in this process. And when you focus more in a design project, you're using usually design charrettes or tactical urbanism making processes with pop-up and DIY equipment. Again, here we use physical gatherings, but you can use more advanced digital tools, design tools like SketchUp, Dynamo, and Grasshopper in order to show ideas and display solutions. Again, these are some examples from a variety of projects. These are the main elements that I wanted to present it. Thank you for your time. And of course, ready to answer any questions or queries.